And now for the most anticlimactic end to a 45-day long cliffhanger in the history of ever. Let's get to work. Just to prove that 45 days wasn't a total fugue state, I did go ahead and make a new intro animation. Let me know down in the comments if you like it. Anyways, happy holidays, people. MisterToolbox is back with another Amazon Lumberyard video. Today we're going to take our second look at the UI editor, jump into the FeatureTest project, and take a look at a bunch of the examples they've got in there. Before we launch the editor, I want to take one quick look in Windows Explorer. So I've navigated to my Lumberyard install. I'm going to jump into the 1.6 directory, then into dev. And you'll see we've got samples project, we've got project templates, multiplayer project, a bunch of stuff in here. When we're looking for the UI samples, they're actually in feature tests. Looking at the name itself, you wouldn't know that it's a full project, so some of you may not have opened it, but that's the one we'll be working with. It's in dev feature tests. Now that we know where to find the project, let's make sure it's set as default in our project configurator. So we'll double click that to open it up. Find feature tests, give that a click, and we'll click set as default. See the asset processor start to process assets, and we are ready to go. So I went ahead and popped open the editor, and I'm going to click open level. What we'll see here is just the normal kind of tree view. The stuff that we're interested in is going to be in the UI section. Now you can play any of these as levels and we'll show them off. We'll start with the UI animation, so I'll click that, click open, let it load up. If your screen looks something like this, you made it. Don't be alarmed. These feature test levels will only include what they need to show off the feature that they're trying to show off. So if we click out here in the perspective view and press Ctrl G, we'll see it launches right into a UI canvas. So let's take a look through this. Now I don't want to spend too much time looking at these when you can easily open them up, look at them yourself, but let's just take a quick peek. We've got simple sequence. If we click start on that, you'll see it just moves this button and a text field, animates them while it does it. Kind of cool, you can type in that text field as it moves around. When it hits the end, it just stops. We can reset it, start it again, stop it, reset it, start it. We can pause it mid-move and then resume it, reset, and you can see that our text is staying persistent as it moves. So pretty cool. Next is the simple looping sequence. Same sort of buttons, but if we click start, we'll see that this outer box moves around the edge of the inner box. It just loops over and over again. So what this is really showing off is that you can just loop these animations. They don't have to have a defined endpoint, if you will. Last, we've got multiple sequences. This one's a bit misleading, but all it's showing us is that for an object, be it this box or this bar, you can have multiple sequences that act on it. So we've got one sequence moving this box, the other's rotating it. And then down here, we've got one sequence moving the bar, and then the other pulsing its color. Now that we've checked that out, let's actually take a look at the canvases that are driving it. As we covered in part 1, when we want to take a look at canvases, we're going to click View, Open View Pane. We're going to launch the UI editor. When that comes into view, we can click File, Open Canvas. Let me step back a couple directories. So in the FeatureTest project, we have a UI folder. Open that up. We can open up canvases, and in here we'll see all of those canvases that are referred to in the levels inside this project. Since we started with the simple sequence, let's go ahead and open that up. So it's UI anim simple sequence.ui canvas. We'll click open. Here it comes into view. In here we'd have all the things that we'd hope to see, a nice clean hierarchy. We've got some buttons on the right. If we click any of those, we'll see all of its properties over on the right, including the name of the click event, so we can track those down in the code. Click some more of these buttons, we'll see that they're all labeled the same way. The real secret sauce, though, is going to be in the animation editor. So let's drag the animation editor up a bit, actually a lot, so we can see what's going on. We'll see it's empty, and this threw me for a loop when I first opened it up. To be able to see any of the stuff that they've got baked in here, you need to click this drop down and choose the test sequence. Then we'll see what we're looking for. What you'll notice about all of these UI samples is that they have a look only a mother could love, but there is a lot that goes into making them work, especially making them animate. So let's take a look at one of those examples, because they are really solid examples to build on. I'm going to expand the anchors underneath the button. I'll choose the left anchor, we'll say, and then I'm going to slide the curve editor well up. Before we get into how this is doing what it's doing, let's just see it in action. I'm going to click this go to start of sequence. That'll make sure this goes back to 0, so we start at the beginning of the animation. And then when I hit this play button, we'll see the timeline slide across this curve. So let's do it. Did you see that go across? Let's do it one more time. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the sequence. That goes to 0, and we can click play. So something is happening. What we see here in the curve is that when we start the animation, the left edge stays where it is until here, until this keyframe. And then it dips down, and as this curve happens, what we see is this button slide from this area of the canvas over to its final resting place in the middle. Let's play it one more time, go back to the beginning, and we'll see that happen. There is the slide. One thing that always helps me kind of cement my understanding of something is breaking it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take this third keyframe and we'll move it from where it is at 0.5 and we'll just drag it down to, let's say 0.25-ish. I can't see quite well enough to do this, but that should work. Now let's see what happens when we play this animation. Back to the beginning and play. We'll do it one more time. So as you saw there, when we hit our trough of 0.25, the button's bound was actually extending all the way to the edge of this panel, which is about 0.25 or 25% of the screen, right? So what this curve is controlling is that left edge position of that button. Starting at 1, dips down to 25% of that relative position, which is here. And now it's bouncing back to 0.5 at the end. Let's play it one more time just so we can see that. You know what, before we do that, let's really go mad and we'll bring this way down and then we'll bring this one back up here just so it's more pronounced. That should work. And we'll hit play. There, now you can really see what's going on. One more time. So fidgeting with these keyframes, we've actually managed to move the position of that left edge. And we can go ahead and do the same thing with, say, the right edge. Let's take this keyframe and let's go wacky. We'll bump this up, something like that. Now I've destroyed someone's hard work, but it's in the name of science, so don't feel too bad about it. We'll raise it up even more. And one more time. It's kind of buried behind these buttons, but what we're now seeing is the right edge is shooting out this way and then shrinking back as we dip down to 0.5. I'm not going to sit here and screw around with these keyframes on OBS for the rest of the night, which I could do. It's kind of fun to mess around with them. But I do encourage you to open this UI editor, load one of these samples, and just mess with it. I think it's the best way to kind of understand how the curve editor and the animation editor work in the UI sense. So this is a perfect example where you can kind of get in there, just mess with things, break it, see if you can fix it, see if you can make it do something that it's not doing now. So maybe we want to reverse the animation. That'd be kind of cool. Go nuts. Just get your head around kind of how these work and how changing one of these keyframes or one of these parameters changes the way these objects animate. Since we violated someone's positional hard work well enough, let's take a look at color animation. I think it is worth checking out because it's slightly different. We know that this type here text box turns red at some point, so that'll be a good thing to take a look at. If we expand that in the animation editor, we'll see we have an XYZ. So let's check out the X. Blast up the curve editor. We see that stays constant at 1, so that is not a good example. Take a look at Y though, and we see that it dips down to 0 at one point, so that is a good candidate for messing with. Before we mutilate this animation, one cool thing to know is that if we click the color parent of this XYZ, we can actually see all of the curves kind of overlapped on one curve editor. Now we see blue and red here, but that's because the green and red are actually the same curve. So it's just buried behind the other one here. So now let's start tweaking it. Let's remind ourselves first what this does. So I've clicked go to start a sequence. We'll click play. We'll watch this timeline go by, and when this dip happens, we should see this text box turn red. There it goes. So let's grab this keyframe that goes down to 0, and let's bump it back up to, say, 0.5. Do the same thing. Click play. Turned orange that time. Cool. Now if we jump back to the color parent, we should see all three curves nicely because they are separated. It's important to note here, you might think it would be XYZ equals RGB. Not the case. They've chosen to do it alphabetically, so if we click X, we'll see that's actually the blue. Y is green like you'd expect, and then Z is the red. Thankfully, the curve editor will show you very clearly what color you're manipulating because these are color coded. But if you happen to be colorblind or something, just know that it's not RGB, it's actually blue, green, red across the X, Y, and Z. Now that we've tweaked this thing, let's go ahead and break it entirely. To do that, I'm going to add one more key. What we'll do is mouse over here in the curve editor and just double click here on the curve. We'll get our new key and we can move it around. So let's drag this guy way down here. Right at the start, we should lose most of our green saturation. It'll build back up. We'll say we'll even go over 1. And then we'll dip down again. Now we have a totally radical in the large sense, curve here. Let's go ahead and give it a play. Back to the beginning and play. We got some purple going on. It dips back down to purple and rises up to orange and then to gray. So we've messed with that saturation. We can jump into red and maybe do the same thing. Jump back to the beginning. We'll hit play on that. And you can see we're going down to orange. Very cool. I can hear you shouting through your monitor, enough with the curves. So I promise I'm done. But I did want to show both the positional curves and the color curves. They're kind of the two main suspects when we're dealing with either anchors or offsets, pivots, and obviously colors. So again, just like the positions, I very much encourage you to jump into a color curve and kind of mess with the saturations and see what it does to different UI elements. Before I stop beating this horse, I want to take a look at one more thing. Please bear with me here. Let me smash down the animation editor again. We'll get the curve editors down as far as we can, and we're going to click that start button again. We head down to the bottom of the properties section. We see we have start sequence. Let's choose stop. If we click that one, we'll see we've got stop sequence. It's important to know where those map to, where they live, what they do. So let's take a look. First of all, counterintuitively, it's not in the UI editor. So let's close this sucker. Yeah, sure, we'll save it. What we need to do is open the flow graph editor. So view, open view pane, and flow graph. Let me drag this guy up here. What we're going to do is expand level, expand entities, expand UI demo flow graph. This is the guy we're after. So I'm going to zoom out, just mouse wheel back, we'll slide over. We'll see we've got some main stuff. This actually loads that canvas as soon as we press Control G or if we started this game. What we're more interested in is the stuff over here on the right. We've got simple sequence, simple looping, and then down at the bottom, multiple sequences. Let's take a look at simple sequence. That's what we've been dealing with so far. Let's scoot back just a little bit over here. What we'll see is that the UI canvas action listener, this is actually on that main canvas. It's got the 3 buttons to load these. When the action name simple sequence is fired, which is on that simple sequence button, it's going to load our simple sequence canvas via this flow graph node right here. So we've got UI canvas load. There's the path to the canvas. When any canvas loads, we get an onload event, and we also get a canvas ID. That canvas ID is perfect for pumping into action listeners, as we see right here. On load, what we're doing is activating every one of these action listeners. As you can see here, the action names map to those names that we've got on those buttons. Each of those action listeners then pumps into some portion of the UI sequence play. So the UI sequence play takes the sequence name, that's that test sequence we were looking at in the animation editor, and the action listeners define which of the actions takes place. So what we see here is canvas loads, activates all these buttons. Let's take a look at the start button. It's got the start sequence action name, and when that fires, we see that it maps to the start action on the sequence. Same deal with the abort. Canvas loads, activates the abort listener on the abort button. When you click it, it fires an action in turn to abort the sequence. So my standard sales pitch applies here. Get in and look at it. It's really well done. It's pretty clean as far as flow graph goes. And it's a good template upon which you can kind of base the way that you do things. They've got it really nicely laid out, and it all makes sense. What always kind of strikes me is how much goes into making something move in a UI. And those UIs are so crude, but it takes a lot to make a move. So if nothing else, if you never plan on using the UI stuff, really will give you an appreciation for what it takes to make a pretty UI, which we 99% of the time take for granted. You know, I had grand designs to look at kind of every one of these levels, but this video is going to be 6 hours long if I do that. I would, however, be remiss if I didn't show off the UI in a 3D world, so we're going to jump straight to that one. We'll click File, Open. We'll get our Open a Level dialog. We'll choose UI in 3D World and click Open. Holy cow, something actually rendered this time. Let's press Ctrl G and take a look. We've got kind of standard WASD controls, some caveats up at the top, but what we can do is fly in and see. As I move my mouse cursor, these are interactive. So let's fly out and find something we can interact with. Here's a button. If I click it, you can see that that button is actually clicking. If I uncheck Animate, animation stops. So how is this working? First, it's important to note that these are all standard canvases. If they're animated, whatever, they're all just .ui canvas files. And the way that they're put together is that each of these component entities, we can tell they're component entities because we have these colored boxes on them, have static meshes, which define the shape, and then they have the material overridden on each of them with the UI canvas. So let's click this top UI in 3D world level. We've got the entity inspector open over here. If you don't have that open, it's under View, Open View Pane, Entity Inspector. But on the static mesh, as I was saying, we have the static asset, which defines the shape of the thing. And then the material is overridden by the UI canvas material. Now that holds true in all the cases except for these 3 center items. We've got the curved plane, the weird egg, and the sphere. On these, what we have is on the curved plane, we'll see we have the UI canvas asset ref, but it's only on that plane. These are actually duplicates, and they employ the UI canvas proxy ref to refer back to this entity, the curved plane. What that means is that if we're in game mode, we come over here and we click the button on the plane, we'll see that it's actually changing when we click it on the egg as well. We stop the animation there, we'll see the animation is stopped on both of those as well. You can click the button on the sphere, it's animating on the egg as well. Now we can see it animating on all three. Now why would we do that? We would do that to save memory. We're only loading that canvas asset ref one time, and we're applying it to different objects. We're only holding one instance of that in memory, which saves us that precious, precious RAM. Over on the right-hand side, we have the inverse of that, where we have two objects that are the same, but both have canvas asset refs. So if we jump into game mode and fly over here, if I click the button on the left, it's only happening on the left. On the right, only on the right. If I stop animation here, it doesn't stop here. These are two distinct iterations, we'll say, of that canvas in the game world. What that obviously means is that they're both taking up memory. So only use that, only use multiple asset refs for the same UI canvas if they both need to be independently interactive, especially if you're going to see them both at the same time. Nice thing about this is that it's only one instance, and it saves us some RAM. One note about the canvas asset ref: when you're taking a look at these yourself, you may wonder what the canvas path name relates to. It's really just the file name of the canvas you're going to load without the .ui canvas on it. So if we click the triple dots to the right here, it's going to jump here, which doesn't help us because the UI canvas isn't there. But if we go into UI, canvases, UI in 3D world, let's slide this down a bit. See, we've got widget test in the canvas path name. That maps to this guy right here, widget test.ui canvas. So it's a little disconcerting in that the UI canvas isn't tacked on the end there, but it really is just the file name without the extension. You'll also notice on all these entities that none of them are set to load automatically. That's because they're all set to do so in FlowGraph. I don't know why they've decided to do it that way, given that things seem to be pointing away from FlowGraph. But if we open up levels, components, slide this guy up. Let's take widget test lit, for instance, and we'll click the default. We'll see here when the game starts, it's activating the load into entity. So it's loading right here. There's a bunch of flow graphs in here. They all do pretty much what you'd expect. They load it, set up the action listeners, and then define the actions on the sequences that they play. Nothing world beating there, but more examples. Do take a look. All right, I'm going to wrap this up before I start getting hate mail about how long it is, but I do want to let you know that there's one other level worth checking out. So File, Open, UI Components. Click OK. Whoops. Press Ctrl-G on that guy. You will find the motherlode of individual component examples. These will show you everything you want to know about anything, be it checkboxes, text, images, buttons, faders. It's all here. There's all flow graphs for all of these. They're all in the UI editor as well. So if I hit escape, jump into the UI editor, file, open canvas. All of these UI comp examples are the canvases that get loaded. So let's take the checkbox, for instance, open it up. You can see how they've composed it. Really solid professional examples, like everything else, of how to get this stuff done. If you have any questions about how any of the entities or objects or elements that you want to put on a form, on a canvas, are put together, that's the place to go. Great examples. Of course, there's really clean flow graph there as well, so it's worth diving into. I'll leave you to do that one on your own. So today's TLDR, or TLDW in our case, is if you want to know how UI works, check out Amazon's examples. I wish they would toot their own horn a little bit more on this because they're really well put together. It may look a little bit crude, but the documentation or just kind of the logical flow of all this stuff is really evident when you start playing with it. I can't hope to do much of it justice right here, but I did want to kind of show some highlights and give you launching off points where you can go off and do your own research and build something that'll look much prettier than anything I'm capable of. I hope you enjoyed. I hope it was helpful. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Please do join the Slack channel. We're getting a lot more traffic recently. I'm giving that a big thumbs up, but I would love to see you there. Tell your friends. I don't have any friends who use Lumberyard or develop games anyway, but jump in, add to the conversation. We're all learning from each other. It's a great time to be alive and slacking. Anyway, bye.